Hey, this is Bond Diesel, and today I bring you my review of Ubisoft's new game Immortals Fenyx Rising. I'll talk a bit about the gameplay, story, graphics, and other things you might be interested in. Before we get started, I do want to be clear that I received this game for free and early from Ubisoft, and I thank them for this opportunity to review. Okay, so jumping right into it, reviews are not my thing. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you know me as a fanboy for another Ubisoft title, but I saw this opportunity to review a game I was personally interested in, so here we go. Immortals Fenyx Rising has had an interesting journey to release, first being promoted as a game called Gods and Monsters, but due to a dispute by, of all companies, Monster Energy Drinks, they had to change the title to an arguably worse name. We now know it as being Immortals Fenyx Rising. I must note that Ubisoft claims that the name change was a creative decision unrelated to legal matters, but I'm yet to hear anyone say they think the new name is actually better, so I will respectfully disagree. Immortals has been called kind of a Zelda Breath of the Wild clone, and I must admit that I've never actually played Breath of the Wild because I don't own a Switch, so I can't really be an authority on whether it's a clone or not. But what I will say is it's a semi-cel shaded-ish graphic style. The way the open world and enemies look and the style of the movement and combat seems the comparison to Breath of the Wild is pretty accurate with what I know from what I've seen of that game. Immortals will release on the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Series systems, as well as PC on December 3rd. The base game is $59.99, and there's a gold version for $99.99 USD. Now let's start talking about some more specific parts of the game. We'll wrap up with a review of my overall thoughts and whether or not I recommend this game to anyone else. Okay, so with gameplay and story, Ubisoft's Immortals plays as, hold your breath because you may not believe it, an open world action adventure game set in a fantasy world of Greek gods. The overall story is that you are a soldier who has washed up upon the shore of this mythical land, and your fellow soldiers have been turned to stone or are missing. You discover that you are in the land of the gods, and they've all been defeated by or are hiding from the Titan Typhon, who was tortured and held prisoner by the gods until a meteor shower broke his chains and released him. You must free or bring back the gods one by one through various tasks to build a team with a final confrontation with Typhon to restore order to the land. The way this plays out in a gameplay perspective is that you find yourself in a very Ubisoft open world, completing missions and tasks in various regions to bring back the gods. And bring back their power to take down Typhon's minions and more powerful compatriots. The fun part is that as you unlock dungeons, you find that much of the gameplay takes place in kind of like an alternate universe that starts off very simple with puzzle solving and things like that, and progressively mixes in more challenging puzzles and what can be very challenging boss fights. The enemies are a lot of fun to fight and give you some really clear indications of when they're going to attack, so you can use a really solid and responsive blocking and counterattack method that's in the game, and the controls. The combat reminds me a little bit of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but it's just a lot more satisfying, and it's hard to explain why. I will add that I found the combat to be extremely fun and satisfying, though I also need to make clear that melee combat games aren't really my type, games like Sekiro and things like that. But I really did enjoy this a lot, and I feel like the combat in this game is definitely one of my favorite parts. Graphics are okay. I wouldn't really consider them next gen, especially I will say after a patch that came after my review kind of period began. It did run really well, and the graphics are like, they're very pretty. I'm playing Immortals on the Xbox Series X that I did purchase myself, and was playing the game in performance mode. The game has a really brightly colored and kind of popping art style with characters and enemies that are so sparsely um, detailed that go along with kind of the cartoony, cell shady type of art style. This is one of the things that has reminded a lot of people of Breath of the Wild. While I wouldn't say the graphics are incredibly impressive or boundary breaking, I did find them really attractive and fun to look at in the various regions of the open world. They really do kind of separate the different biomes and areas by making the environmental design much different, and they distinguish themselves very well. I can't do this review without mentioning that there are some leaked footage videos from early in the game where they did straight take Assassin's Creed Odyssey models as placeholders for this game. This is on Anvil, engine wise, which is the same as Assassin's Creed Breakpoint, and I think Far Cry. This game does appear to be, at least at first, reusing assets. Obviously, it's a very different art style than Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but I suspect these were kind of modified assets from that game. But I don't believe it's an Odyssey ripoff. And in many ways, I personally found this game much more charming and more fun to play than Odyssey, which is part of the, in my opinion, has just become a very bloated franchise in Assassin's Creed, and just seems like it's a long game, including Odyssey and Origins and now Valhalla, that they're just long for the sake of being long without really packing in story and so on and so forth, which makes this game very refreshing because I feel like it really does move along at a very good clip. The audio is less about the actual game sounds, which are fine and satisfying and great. A lot of the upgrade sounds and combat sounds are great and hit those dopamine receptors as they're intended to. But for me, the real star of the audio is the voice acting performances. Though I may admit I'm probably going to be in the minority there. Zeus and other various characters, to me, were very charming and fun to hear tell jokes, even if they were a bit cringy. They go on and on about references to stories from Greek mythology with their own comedic spins on it. I will be the first to say that I'm not very well versed in these stories in Greek mythology, so I know I'm probably missing a lot of inside jokes and nuances to it. But I really did enjoy it. It's just a relaxed, matter-of-fact, self-aware, and even fourth wall breaking style in the way that they did the story and some of the narration. If you find it annoying, I get it, and it seems to be persistent through the game, so do be aware of that. If you get annoyed by the first 10 minutes, you're going to be annoyed the entire game. So with controls and just that part of the gameplay, I'm not really a big melee combat player, so I'm not a big fan of games like Witcher 3, the new God of War, and Assassin's Creed. That said, I did find the combat in Immortals to be very responsive, snappy, and a lot of fun to play with a decent opportunity to master it and really feel yourself getting better and more able to use it to its full ability. It seems that you could brute force your way through a lot of the encounters, but there's definitely a few that become way easier as you learn how to parry, encounter, and do those types of things. You also get to upgrade abilities that will assist you in combat big time, and gives you the opportunity to kind of customize how you fight because there's kind of an upgrade tree that you can go down. Running, jumping, dodging, and everything else were extremely responsive, and in my opinion, it just really felt good. The best part of this game, in my opinion, is just the way it feels. It feels there's a lot of satisfaction to the way this game plays. When it comes to bugs and issues, I personally didn't find any major bugs in playing a really good amount of the game. At this point, I would say I have to be around 20 to 25% of the way through the game. I didn't finish it. If you don't know me or know my Twitter, I had COVID for this last week and have been struggling with that quite a bit. So the fact that I'm even recording this audio and editing this video should be a huge surprise. And I will use that as the excuse to why it's not very impressive. One of the benefits of playing on the next gen systems is that even when there were one or two crashes that I had, they were resolved very quickly by just restarting the game, and the new systems just load this game up so quickly. It does not seem like this game, at least at review time, is part of the quick resume program, but it probably will be since it's an offline game. I will be curious to see how this game works on last gen systems and how the PC port works out. But my impression at the time of this review, from my opinion, is that it runs extremely well, and I didn't notice any huge game breaking issues. With DLC and monetization, DLC has been announced and appears to be expansions to both the story and the open world. Monetization appears to be focused on cosmetics and equipment with no competitive multiplayer. It doesn't really matter to me. I didn't see any time savers, which have been known to be in Ubisoft games, especially Assassin's Creed. But the way things have gone in recent years, it should be worth keeping an eye on that, because sometimes those things magically appear shortly after the review periods for these games. I'm looking at you, Breakpoint. Final thoughts and recommendations. Overall, I really enjoyed Immortals Fenyx Rising a lot. I'm by no means an aficionado of these types of games, but playing through it felt really refreshing and exciting, despite it definitely following the kind of stereotypical Ubisoft open world trend. After playing a similar amount of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I'd honestly say I think I'm way more likely to continue playing Fenyx and finishing Immortals, mostly due to the lighter and more fun atmosphere and due to the combat feeling so much more skillful and less button mashy. While I suggest checking out other reviewers that you may have more history with and more in common with, I think Immortals is well worth people looking into and having something light and fun to mix with games coming out soon, such as Cyberpunk. Thank you for sticking around for the whole video, and please feel free to let me know what you think about my review, or posting any questions you have about the game in the comments below. If you want to support my content, please check out my Patreon at patreon.com/bondiesel. Check out my Division 2 podcast, The Echo Cast, on all podcast platforms, including iTunes, Anchor, and Spotify. I am Bondiesel on Twitch, where I stream a few times a week. I am at Bondiesel on Twitter, where you can catch my thoughts, state of the game for Division 2, recaps and live tweets, and the occasional foot in my own mouth. And that's all I have. So, until next time.
1, 2, 3, jump!